Hi folks, happy Friday to you. Welcome to the weekend. I trust that you've had a good reading week and you managed to cram some excellent science fiction in. And on that subject, let's see what I've been reading this week. First, I read The Colour of Distance by Amy Thomson, and this is actually pretty hard to find in the UK. Well, it's actually not hard to find. There are copies available, but they're really expensive. You'd easily pay 30, 35, even £40 for a copy in the UK. And something similar actually in the US, although that might include postage. It was only issued in the US. There was no UK edition, and it only had one printing, or maybe two. I think there were two. There was this trade paperback, and then there was a smaller mass market paperback, but that was it. Only one printing. There were no further editions. This came heartily recommended to me by Seth, amongst others, and I'm very grateful to him and the others for doing that, because I did really enjoy it. This book follows the story of a female survey scientist. Handily enough, she's a xenobiologist, Dr. June Sari, and she's on this planet, I forget the name of it, and her survey team has crashed, and all the other people are dead, and she's near death as well. And the atmosphere is toxic, or at least triggers a severe allergic reaction to humans that we're not adapted to it at all. Unfortunately for Juna, the local froggy aliens, the Tendu, find her, and they have these little spurs in their wrists, which allow them to connect to their fellow Tendu on a almost cellular level. And one of them connects to Juna as she's lying, dying, panting on the ground, and he goes about fixing her. And that fixing includes some modifications which will help her to survive in the alien biosphere that is now her home for a while. And at some cost to the alien that fixed her. It doesn't do him any good, let's just put it that way. So Juna is now a new creature in every sense. She's a new creature to the Tendu because she's completely alien to them, and she's new from her own perspective as well, because she's no longer quite human. They've changed her skin, they've changed her breathing apparatus, they've fixed a couple of internal medical problems that she didn't even know she had. So she's as good as new and adapted to survive locally. Juna, even in her new and improved form, is several years away from being rescued, and there's not likely to be a return mission anytime soon. And so she needs to really fit into Tendu life. And I guess really that's the crux of the story. There's no verbal communication. The Tendu don't communicate via speech, or at least not vocal speech. They have responsive skin, and so they communicate by changing their skin colour and the patterns on their skin. And handily, Juna has been equipped with the same mechanism or similar ones. So that's how she's able to gradually learn their language. She ends up becoming, I forget the term for it in the book, but it's effectively like a Jedi Padawan to one of the village elders who it grudgingly drags her around the place and teaches her stuff, but they become firm friends. And so Juna learns their ways. She learns to communicate, and she impresses the Tendu with her strength and her work rate. And she in turn becomes the Jedi Master, if you like, to a young Tendu. It's quite a tense scene in the book, actually, effectively adopting him to all intents and purposes and forming a strong bond. I really like the way that Amy Thomson describes the biology in this. It's an alien rainforest, effectively, but it's not gratuitously done. It's not dry exposition. It's part of the story, and I think done pretty well. There are complex dynamics between the Tendu within the village, and then even more so between one village and another village. And I thought that those relationships, with Tendu to Tendu, and also between the Tendu and Juna, were done really well. There's a fair bit of jeopardy as the story goes, and then there are a whole different set of problems and dilemmas that arise when her rescue does eventually come several years later. We get a nice view into the Tendu way of life and into the wisdom of the wandering Enkar, who are cast out of their villages, or who choose to be cast out of their villages to pursue a life of a sort of wandering hermit, effectively. And they can be hundreds of years old, and they're sought out for their wisdom and for their problem-solving skills, and to adjudicate over the affairs of the villages. I think if you like Symbiosis by Sue Burke, or Alien Clay by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and if you like a bit of biology in your science fiction in general, then this is a book that I think you'd enjoy. I really recommend it. I was very engaged by the story. It's not too thick, a few hundred pages, and it goes by pretty smoothly, I thought. Next, I read, or rather listened to, The Quantum Magician by Derek Kunsken, which is the first book of his that I've read. And it's a space opera heist combo, and quite an amusing one at that, set several hundred years in the future. And he's extrapolated from the current nation states into a network of patron and client states, which have expanded out into space. There's an Anglo-Spanish Union. There's what are they called? Begins with C, conglomerate, something like that. That's basically francophone in nature. And there are other subservient polities that sit underneath them. There's a wormhole network left conveniently by some kind of forerunner aliens many years ago. And I thought that the author did a pretty good job creating a sort of richly imagined splintered humanity. And that's politically, as I've described, but also genetically. There are a bunch of different subspecies of humans, and many of them appear in this book. Belisarius is his first name. I can't remember his surname. It's something Spanish. And he's a homo quantus, a sort of engineered mentat, if you think in Dune terms, capable in fugue state of remarkable feats of analysis and calculation. But he's also a bit broken. He ran away from their secluded base and kind of education system many years ago, and now he makes a successful living as a con man. Bell has a new client, and he's been hired to spirit away a small fleet of innovative warships from under the noses of his client's patron state. It's essentially Ocean's 11 in space. Bell spends quite a bit of the first half of the book assembling his crew from the various branches of humanity. There's a puppet, on which more later. There's another Quantus, an old flame of his. There's a crazy French explosives expert. And then there's a so-called mongrel engineered to live and work at great pressure under the oceans of a planet like Europa, or in deep vacuum of space. There's an AI priest, St. Matthew, who's intent on bringing back a sort of form of Christianity to an irreligious future. And then there are several others as well to boot. And actually that takes quite a little while to assemble the crew as a bit of a grand tour, getting the band together. But it's interesting as he does it, and you get a bit of an insight into each of the subspecies of humanity as he does. This is a tale of bluff and double bluff, of cons within cons, with added exotic physics and the promise of time travel, and a huge reward for the crew if they can pull it off. It reminded me a little bit, I mean, they are completely different books, but it reminded me a little bit of Tom Toner's Amarantine books, although a lot more breathlessly paced. There were lots of nice detail in the variety of the human subspecies, kind of similar parallels in the Tom Toner books. I thought the audiobook narration was very good. I can't remember who did it. I'll put it on the screen. And they did a nice job of the array of accents that were on display in this book. There were some nice ideas. He had this notion of versions of languages, and some of the francophone people spoke Français 8.1, which is a kind of version of French used on the planet Venus, but only in the higher courts or something like this, quite specific, with quite a different intonation, and I thought that was quite well done. And there were a bunch of other variations on the theme. The puppets, who are like diminutive 1 meter high humans, and they were engineered to be slaves to another species, a subspecies, the new men, and they have descended into a religious worship of these new men, and that's quite, it's described in a lot of detail, and it's very funny would be the wrong word. It's quite peculiar actually, but it's quite amusing as well. The ecstasies that they go into over the smallest things, and there are some funny references to their religious texts, which are really anything but. As we get a couple of glimpses into it. The banter between Marie, who's the French explosives expert, and the mongrel Stills was very good. It was creatively vicious. They really have at it. A lot of expletives and creative cussing exchanged. And generally speaking, it was a fun cast of characters. There's one in particular that stood out for me, although it didn't appear that often, was a character called the Scarecrow. And he's a special agent for one or other of the large factions, the French one, I think. He's not even human. He's kind of effectively an AI, a walking AI. But he looks like a scarecrow, and he's quite a fearsome individual, for just based on the brief descriptions. I have a suspicion that he'll appear more in the following books. So it's complex. It's an interesting setting. Kunsken sets a rollicking pace. I think the dialogue's good. It's an interesting cast. Plus, you have the fun of trying to figure out the true con as the layers of the con are peeled away. And there are 2 more books. And I think while I listen to this one on audiobook, I'd actually have to pay to listen to books 2 or 3. So I might try and get hold of physical copies. I think based on my enjoyment of the first one, I think they're worthy additions to the library. Next, I lost my Cherryh, reading my first CJ Cherryh book, and it's one of her classics, Downbelow Station. And this is space opera, but it's quite political, maybe even a little bit dense and dry, but it certainly held my interest throughout. I had heard tell of it being a bit difficult to get into, but I didn't find that. We're in the dog days of the war between something called the Earth Company and the Union, and Pell Station is the meat in that war sandwich. It's quite a large space station, enough space for thousands of people, and it orbits above the planet Pell. And it's become, with the destruction of several other bases, it's become a crucial base. It's got its sustaining planet down below, critically, that most don't, and it finds itself now on the borders between the company and the Union. Both parties, unsurprisingly, want control of Pell Station, or Downbelow Station, as the folks that live there call it. The stationers attempt to be neutral, but they're caught now between two hostile parties. And to add to that, then there's political infighting on the station, all whilst handling thousands of desperate refugees who've been dumped there, their own stations having been destroyed in the war. There's the obvious background tension throughout from being on what's a very vulnerable orbiting facility in a time of war. As has been demonstrated on numerous other occasions, these stations are extremely vulnerable. They're easily destroyed. So it's densely written. Again, I think in a good way. There's lots of detail. I enjoyed the Constantine family, who are the kind of stalwart leaders amongst the stationers. And then there's Captain Mallory, who developed nicely as a character. She's the captain of one of the company ships, and she's tough but fair and increasingly at odds with her quixotic fleet captain. There are secret agents, even secret agents that have forgotten that they're secret agents, and there's plot and counterplot. And it's all quite claustrophobic because of the setting. We're mostly on Downbelow Station or in cramped spaceships. We get the origin story of the Alliance, which features more heavily in other books. And in this story, they're a ragtag assembly of merchant ships trying to stay alive, to stay neutral, playing an increasingly robust role as the story progresses. I thought the Downers were a nice touch. They're the local sentient life. They play an increasingly critical role as the situations become more and more tense. They appear quite childlike and dependent in many ways on the humans that they've come to know. But it does turn out that they're a little bit more to them than that. I enjoyed the glimpses that we get of the wider universe in which the story sits. And you rightly get the impression that there are many more stories to be told. So in summary, I liked it. It certainly didn't put me off reading more CJ Cherryh, and I'm pleased about that because I've got a bunch of them on my shelves. So all in all, a pretty good reading week. Do let me know what you've been up to during the week, particularly if you have something that you'd like to recommend to me and to the others. Do let us know in the comments. Right, I do have something for Indy Corner this week. So this is a sporadic feature where I showcase a self-published novel. I get emails from time to time asking me to review a novel on my channel, and rather than overcommit myself when I already have like a mountain of books on my TBR pile, what I can easily do is to just share a bit of details here in this segment. So this week, Phil Bailey asked me to tell you about his book, Kelvoo's Testimonial, which is now book one in a trilogy called Kelvoo's Chronicles, which he finished just last year. So in the first book, Kelvoo is an alien. He's overcome with wonder at the arrival of the humans. With flawless memories and an innate curiosity, Kelvoo's community embraces the benevolent humans, and their knowledge of the boundless universe beyond the cloud-covered sky. But after the departure of the first contact mission, an unscrupulous human lands in Kelvoo's village, inviting Kelvoo and 8 others to join a goodwill mission to faraway worlds. Lured into a trap, of course it is, and enslaved by an outlaw gang, Kelvoo's group is forced to participate in an interstellar crime spree and subjected to the worst of human nature. Realising that the mission is destined to end with their murder, Kelvoo's team must use their limited insight into human nature to understand and escape the brutality of their capture. With Kelvoo's world and species vulnerable to exploitation, failure would have devastating consequences far beyond Kelvoo's own death. So Kelvoo's Testimonial, according to Phil, is equal parts action, philosophy and hard science fiction. And the story takes the form of Kelvoo's personal account, providing an outsider's view of humanity in all its beauty and its savagery. And then the story continues in books 2 and book 3. As usual, I'll put the links in the description for this so you can find it for yourself if it sounds interesting to you. I haven't read it, so I can't vouch for it one way or another, but the reviews seem to be pretty good for it. Of course, that could just be Phil's mum. I've no idea, but it seems positive. All right, channel stuff next then. Subs are at 5734. It's 5,734, and that's up 42 on this time last week. If you're one of those 42, or if you've just stumbled upon my channel for the first time this week, then a huge welcome to you. I'm John, and I focus on collecting, reading, and waffling on about science fiction books, old and new. Comment of the week this week was from Alison Farnell in response to, I think, a statement that I made on the Paul Anderson video that we'll talk about in a while, where I said there was no room in my life for shit books, and that's certainly true. And her response to that was that was truly something to live by. And then she said, if the books aren't worth anything, I should just cut the covers off for cool artwork. And that did give me the shivers. I'm not sure, however much I want to make room on my shelves, that I could really bring myself to cut the covers off a perfectly good book. I even if it's a shit one. But thank you to Alison for taking the time to leave a comment, and to all of you that do the same during the week. I do really appreciate it. Let's take a quick look at what was on the channel this week. On Sunday, there was a recap of April's reading, in which I took a look back at every book that I read. I tier ranked them, and I ultimately declared a book of the month, or actually in this case, books of the month. It was shaping up to be a somewhat mediocre month with a couple of moderately high spots. And then because I finished my reading and my planned reading with a couple of days to spare, I picked 2 extra books off my shelves, which I've been wanting to read for ages. And fortunately for me, and for you all perhaps, I really enjoyed them. So that maybe gives you a clue to which books ended up being the books of the month. And on Tuesday, there was a bit of extreme shelf audit and a video that I titled Keep or Kill, I think, focused specifically on Paul Anderson, where I went through my Paul Anderson collection, would be the wrong term, accumulation of Paul Anderson paperbacks. I think I had about 25 of them. And based on my reading experience of the 2 that I read, and then extrapolating from the Goodreads rating for the others, I decided which ones I was going to keep and which ones I will chuck, or at least pass on. And actually, 4 of them have already been bought, so that's great. I think as someone suggested in the comments for that video, I think that process could be improved and made perhaps less risky by also referring to the Science Fiction Encyclopedia, which I completely forgot to do because I use it as a laptop stand. So it's not actually in plain view most of the time because it's so fat. So I will do that for next time. I think it's probably a useful idea. Okay, on the book buying front, as we sit here on the 9th of May, I have already blown May's book budget. I'm no longer in credit. In fact, I'm well in the red. I confess I've ordered a fair few things in the last week, a few of which will arrive imminently. They're going to be delivered here in the UK, but the rest are from US sellers. And I'm taking advantage of the fact that a friend of mine is visiting in a few weeks' time. And she's agreed to very kindly to courier a bunch of books over for me. So I think I'm just about exhausted her baggage allowance, but there are 3 or 4 more that I'll probably add to that list today, and then I'll call it a day. I did fall down a bit of a NESFA rabbit hole. NESFA, if you're not familiar, is the New England Science Fiction something association, I guess, and they have a publishing arm. And they've done some really good work over the years, publishing nice hardback editions of particular books. And I found a bunch that I quite fancy myself. And most of them are in the US because it's a US publisher. You can get them sometimes in the UK, but they tend to be more expensive. So I've ordered a bunch of those, and there are 3 or 4 more that I'm extremely tempted by that I might well add. The to be hauled pile is now 37, with a further 29 on their way, mostly via my US-based book courier friend. And we have, while she's over, a couple of dealer visits planned. So I expect that I will add to that tally considerably. And June's book haul, I think, is going to be spectacular. Let's take a look ahead. On Sunday, possibly, maybe Tuesday, if time runs away from me at the weekend, there will be a video asking the question, when is a book not a book? And at some point during the week following that, I think probably Thursday, as that's around the middle of the month, there will be May's book haul, where I shall share what's on that pile that I just spoke about. And beyond that, I think I'd better not commit to anything at the moment, because I seem to be failing to actually progress any of the ideas that I had. There will be stuff, but I think it's going to be a little bit hand to mouth for the next few weeks whilst I get my shit together. What will I be reading? I'm going to read Blake Crouch, Upgrade, which should be light work, I think. And after that, I'm going to read My Dirty Little Book of Stolen Time by Liz Jensen, which I'm very much looking forward to. That's on the Broderick and Philippot 100 Best Novels list, as is Galapagos by Kurt Vonnegut, which I'm listening to on audiobook, actually. I found that it was available, and I've spaffed one of my Audible credits, not because I particularly want to listen to it in audiobook, but I think I was looking at my TBR pile for the month, and there's quite a few fat books on it, so that I need all the help I can get. So I shall listen to that whilst I'm out running at the weekend and on a couple of occasions next week, and hopefully I shall finish that by the time we speak next time. As always, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful weekend, and until next time, goodbye for now.